Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto became the Overlord of Death, blessed by Kushina and the Kyuubi. Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. I don't own anything. Naruto sighed as he crawled into bed and thought, what a night. First I get tricked into stealing a stupid scroll and then I find out I got a demon sealed in me. What next? Pigs flying. I just want to get some sleep. As he closed his eyes. It was some time later Naruto felt someone running their hand through his hair and opened his eyes and saw a teenage woman with red hair and bluish-green eyes hovering over him running her hand through his hair. Blinking Naruto said, "Who are you?" The girl's eyes widened a moment and said, "Ah, you're awake. Forgive me for disturbing your sleep." As she moved back a few feet. Naruto sat up and looked at the woman confused and said, "It's alright. I'm not mad or anything. I just was wondering who you are." The woman said, "My name is Nori." Naruto looked around and said, "Well Nori, where are we and how did I get here?" Nori looked at Naruto confused a moment and said, "You've never been here before." Naruto looked at the area around him and saw rubble and dead trees and said, "No. I've never seen anything like this place before." Nori said, "Wow, I can't believe my luck in finding you first. It must be my lucky day." With an odd look on her face. Naruto looked confused and asked, "What do you mean?" Nori said, "Forgive me. It's just that not many overlords appear." Naruto tilted his head to the side and asked, "What's an overlord?" Nori said, "Well, how do I explain it to you? I got it. Have you ever looked at yourself in a mirror and seen your reflection?" Naruto nods and Nori said, "Some people think when you see your reflection you are seeing you in another world. That is sort of true. There are two worlds. The mortal world and the spirit world called the Negaverse. Where you were before was the mortal world and right now you are in the Negaverse." Naruto got a scared look on his face and asked, "Am I dead?" Nori said, "No. Somehow you have been blessed or cursed by the Shinigami which allows you to go between the two worlds. Those who are able to do this are called overlords because they have power over the living and the dead." Naruto asked, "Are you dead?" Nori tilted her head to the side and said, "Before I answer can I explain a few things about the Negaverse to you? I could say yes or no but there are several levels of difference here you need to know if you are going to be here." Naruto pursed his lip and said, "Alright." Nori nods and said, "When a mortal is born, they have a certain amount of life energy in them. Once that life energy is gone they die so you can say that every day someone lives they are also dying a day at a time. You with me so far?" Naruto nods and Nori said, "Good. Now when a person ages in your world and dies a day at a time, they are reborn here as a creature known as a minion. Minion are the lowest level of life here. They don't remember anything about their life in the other world but when them that is alive in the mortal world dies, minion transform and become another race depending on how they lived their life in that world. Almost no one here looks human unless they are an overlord." Naruto said, "So you're an overlord?" Nori shook her head and said, "No. When I was alive in the mortal world I was a human sacrifice. I have no idea what I was sacrificed for but when a mortal dies as a human sacrifice they come here as a human. I don't remember anything about my life besides my name. What happens in the mortal world doesn't matter here after you die." Naruto said, "I see." Nori shook her head and said, "No, not yet you don't. I admit I don't know everything about this world but I do know some things. You see, what makes you different than me besides the fact that you are still alive in the mortal world and I am dead is that you still have your life energy. Life energy is very valuable here. I told you I was surprised that I was the first to find you. It won't be long before others start coming to you." Naruto asked, "Why?" Nori bit her lip and said, I know, follow me." As she got up and started to walk away. Naruto got up and said, "Hey, wait up." As he ran after her. When he caught up to her she was looking at a dead tree and said, "If you would send some energy into this tree I will be able to explain. It's hard to explain unless you see it for yourself." Naruto frowned and thought, does she mean my chakra? Maybe. As he placed his hand on the tree and sent some chakra into his hand. A few moments later the tree began to glow and Naruto's eyes widened before he stepped back and Nori said, "It's alright Overlord. Just keeping sending your energy until it stops glowing." Naruto said, "My name is Naruto. As he slowly started to send chakra into the tree again, and as the tree glowed, it began to change shape until it became a glowing blue gem the size of Naruto, and Nori clapped her hand and said, "Ah, that feels great. Thank you, Overlord Naruto." Naruto looked at Nori, who had her eyes closed, and said, "What happened?" Nori opened her eyes with a smile on her face and said, "This is now you Tower Heart. Tower Hearts are a link between overlords and their subjects. As long as the Tower Heart exists, you will live in both this world and the mortal world, but if your Tower Heart is destroyed, you will die." Naruto eyes widened and Nori said, "It's alright. Most of those who live in this world won't dare damage a Tower Heart. Look at the ground. You see how there is grass growing a little bit right now? It's because it's bathing in the energy of your heart like I am now. It's like a feeling of peace and pleasure bathing me. Because of this, many here would be willing to do anything, including becoming your subjects, so they may be close to your heart and feel this feeling." Naruto said, "So this Tower Heart is linked to me now?" As he looked at the gem. Nori said, "Yes, and the more powerful you become Overlord, so does your Tower Heart." Naruto looked at the ground that was now a 100 feet wide circle of green grass and asked, "What now?" Nori tilted her head to the side and said, "Well, I'm not sure. I mean, I never met a Overlord before, but..." Just then a noise was heard and both turned toward the noise, and Naruto eyes widened and Nori said, "A minion." Naruto remembered Nori words earlier and said, "That's a minion." Nori looked at Naruto and said, "I told you already that there are hardly any humans here, because when they die they become something else based on what they lived like." A gray-skinned creature came crawling toward Naruto and said, "Oh great Overlord, I am Nat. I beg you, allow me to serve your lordship." As he groveled on the ground at Naruto's feet. Naruto looked at Nori and asked, "What should I do?" Nori shrugged and said, "Maybe he knows more than me and can help you." Naruto sighed and said, "Nat, I guess you can serve me." Nat quickly began to kiss Naruto's feet, much to Naruto's disgust, and Nat said, "Oh thank you, your lordship. You won't regret it." Naruto yanked his foot back and said, "I'm starting to think I might," as he tried to shake the slobber off his feet. Nori giggled and Nat asked, "What are your orders, your lordship?" Naruto looked confused and said, What do you think, Nat?" Nat said, "Oh your lordship, are you asking me to be your minion advisor?" in an excited voice. Naruto blinked and looked at Nori, who seemed confused also, and Naruto said, Sure." Nat said, "Oh thank you, thank you, thank you. I promise I will be the greatest advisor I can for your greatness. Shall I begin building a tower to help defend your Tower Heart, master?" Naruto asked, "Defend it? Why defend it?" Nat gasped and said, "Master, you should not joke like that. Someone could come and steal it for their own master. You must defend it, because if it is destroyed by a hero, then you will die." Naruto blinked and looked at Nori and asked, "Why would a hero try and destroy my heart?" Nori said, "Heroes here are not like heroes in the mortal realm. Hero kill those with power in order to take it for themselves, in order to build an empire in their own image using the stolen power." Naruto frowned and said, "I see. Yes, Nat, begin setting up a tower to defend my heart." Nori said, "May I speak freely, Overlord Naruto?" Naruto nods and Nori said, "This rebel was probably at one time a town or another tower. That means there might be valuables like scrolls, relics, or gold in the rubble. I would suggest that you have a treasure vault, a relic room, and a library added to your tower to store them." Naruto said, "Great idea. Nori, you have been a great help to me, so is there any way I can repay you?" Nori said, "Allow me to be by your side so I can enjoy the feeling of your heart. That is all I ask." Naruto said, "You can be by my side as long as you want, Nori, because without you I wouldn't have a clue what is going on." Nat said, "Does that mean Nori is Lady Nori, master?" Naruto said, "Yes." Nori eyes widened and said, "I'm honored you would give me such a show of gratitude, my lord. I will do my best to please you and serve you faithfully." Naruto looked confused a moment and asked, "What do you mean?" Nori blinked and said, "You don't know, my lord." Naruto said, "Know what?" Nori said, "You have made me a lady of your kingdom, my lord. My mind, body, and soul now belong to you to do with as you please, my lord. You may use me any way you wish, my lord." Naruto asked, "Use you? I don't understand." Nori blushed and said, "Would you like me to show you, my lord?" Naruto nods and Nori said, "As you wish, my lord," as she moved forward and kissed Naruto before beginning to remove his cloths. Naruto eyes widened as he was kissed before he closed them and thought, If this is what it's like, then I think I'm going to like being an overlord. 2 hours later, Naruto groaned as he felt the need to take a piss, and he opened his eyes and saw the form of Nori laying on his chest. Getting up, Naruto blinked and blinked again and said, "Damn." Nori, hearing Naruto's voice, opened her eyes and said, "Is there something wrong, your lordship? Did I not please you enough? I can try to please you better if you wish, my lord." Naruto looked down at Nori and said, "I doubt there is anything you could do that could please me more than you did earlier." "That pleased me greatly. I was just looking at the work Nat has done while we were busy." Nori looked over and saw a 30-feet wall and said, "Wow, he really has been busy." Walking over to a tree, Naruto pissed on it, which to his amusement caused the tree to come back to life some, and Naruto shook his head before grabbing his pants and shirt before slipping them on. Nori quickly put back on the dress she was wearing, and Naruto offered her his hand, and they both walked toward the wall, and when they go on the other side of it, Naruto said, "There's more minions now," in a confused tone. Nat said, "Your lordship. Great news. I remember the location of a spawning pool for some browns, and I have got them to swear allegiance to your greatness. As such, the building of the castle walls are moving swiftly, and we should have the outside walls of the castle courtyard done by tomorrow." Naruto said, "Excellent, but what is the difference between you and the brown minions?" Nat said, "There are several types of minions, my lord. Greys like myself are the more educated and take up the position of leaders of the other minions. Brown minions are stronger and tougher than other minions but slower. Red minions are immune to fire and can use fire attacks. Green minions are immune to poisons and use poison to attack and are great at stealth and scouting. Lastly is blue minions. Blues have the ability to swim and are the strongest magic users." Naruto tilted his head to the side and asked, "Magic?" Nori said, "Magic is created by mana, which is a form of energy that can be used similar to life energy." Naruto nods and said, "So what now? I mean, you seem to have the walls coming along quickly to defend my tower heart." Nat said, "If I might make a suggestion, my lord." Naruto nods and Nat said, "Perhaps you should return to the mortal realm now and rest your mind and spirit." Naruto asked, "How do I do that, and for that matter, how exactly did I get here in the first place?" Nat said, "I do not know how you got here the first time, your lordship, but now that you've established a connection with your tower heart, all you have to do is imagine the place you wish to be and think the word Portu. It's best if you are coming here, then imagine the tower heart is the safest location to return to." Naruto said, "And that's it?" Nat said, "That's it, your lordship." Naruto looked at Nori, who said, "It's all right, your lordship. I'll be here when you return." Naruto nods and said, "Nat, I wish for you to consult with Nori for ideas on how to protect the tower heart and the next course of actions that should be taken." Nat said, "Of course, your lordship. I'll make sure all the minions know that Lady Nori is yours and yours alone." Naruto blinked and said, "What do you mean, Nat?" Nori said, "What he means, your lordship, is that not everyone is as respectful to women as you are, your lordship." Naruto frowned and started to open his mouth when Nori said, "Don't worry about it for now, your lordship. You need to rest, and Nat has promised to protect me." Naruto said, "All right, if you're sure, but I'll be back." Portu. As he disappeared in a puff of smoke. After he was gone, Nat looked at Nori and said, "So what do you think of our master?" Nori said, "He's not what I would expect of an overlord." Nat said, "I couldn't agree more. I actually like him compared to the other overlords I have heard about, and he is far better than a hero." Nori said, "Please get the Browns back to work, Nat. They seem to be slacking off." Nat's eyes widened before turning and screaming, "Get back to work, you ungrateful maggots." When Naruto appeared in his apartment, he looked at his clock and blinked and thought, "It's only been an hour. I thought I was gone half a day or better. Well, I can get some sleep now, and after Nori I need it." As a perverted grin appeared on his face. When Naruto awoke, he thought, "Man, what a dream. I can't believe that I dreamed I went to another world and—" A female voice interrupted his thoughts and said, "That wasn't a dream, your lordship. You really did come here." Naruto's eyes widened and said, "Nori, is that you?" Nori stood next to the tower heart and said, "Yes, Lord Naruto. I'm using the link between you and the tower heart to hear and speak to you. The tower heart doesn't just link your energy to it, but also makes it where we can see you and be able to talk to you. You also don't have to speak, just think your words and those around your heart can hear you." Naruto thought, "Like this?" Nori said, "Yes." Naruto thought, "Cool. So is there a reason you are contacting me besides explaining about this ability?" Nori said, Nat was wanting to inform you that they finished the outside courtyard walls and were about to begin construction of the castle when I suggested that we consult with your lordship about the castle. I thought that you might be able to research other castles in your world in order to find out how to make the best one possible to defend the Tower Heart. Naruto thought, that's a good idea. I don't want to be killed by some hero when my life is starting to look up. I am glad you were the first one to find me. I am sure I would have already been killed if I hadn't have met you. Nori said, I will do all I can to please and serve you, master. Naruto looked at the clock on the wall and thought, I got to go for now, Nori, but I'll talk to you later. As he got up and took a shower and quickly got dressed. After getting dressed, Naruto headed toward the Hokage Tower, and when he got there he went up to the Sandaime office, and after being allowed to pass by his secretary entered the Sandaime office. Hiruzen Sarutobi, the Sandaime Hokage of Konoha, looked up at Naruto and said, Hello Naruto, how are you doing this morning? Naruto said, Pretty good, old man. I got a couple of questions though. Hiruzen said, Well, I will try to answer them if I can't. What would you like to know? Naruto started to open his mouth when the voice of Nat said, My lordship. I would be careful with what you say. I do not know of what knowledge there is in your world. Naruto thought, I know, but I trust Gigi. Hiruzen saw Naruto start to speak and then his eyes gloss over a moment before they come back into focus, and Hiruzen said, Is everything alright, Naruto? Naruto shook his head and said, Yeah. Anyways, I was wondering. You told me last night that the Yondaime summoned the Shinigami to help seal the Kyuubi, right? Hiruzen nods and Naruto said, I see. I'm not sure, but I think the Shinigami gave me a gift when he sealed the Kyuubi in me. Hiruzen blinked and said, Really? Why do you think that? Naruto said, Well, last night when I went to sleep I found myself in another place called the Negaverse. Hiruzen eyes widened and said, You're an overlord now, aren't you? Naruto eyes widened and said, How did you know? Hiruzen frowned and said, I've been alive for many years now and have seen and encountered many strange things, Naruto. I've met these so-called heroes. As he spat out the last word. Naruto said, So you don't like those heroes either, huh? Hiruzen said, No, each were power-hungry madmen who caused nothing but pain and suffering in their paths. How much do you know about the Negaverse and the overlords and heroes, Naruto? Naruto said, Not much. Nori and Nat have told me some and are trying to help me understand everything, but I'm confused a lot. Hiruzen asked, Who are Nori and Nat? Naruto said, Well, Nat is a minion. Hiruzen said, Minions, the servants of the overlords. Naruto scrunched his nose and said, Nori told me that every day that someone is alive is another day that they die. Minions are people sort of like the spirits of humans that are still alive here in this world but haven't died or been killed yet. They don't remember anything about their life besides their name. After someone dies for real, the minion there transforms into another creature depending on what they were like when they were alive. I've only met a Nat, Nori, and a few brown minions, but I haven't learned their names yet. Nori is, as he frowned. Hiruzen asked, Yes, what is she, Naruto? Naruto said, She's human, but she told me only someone who was used as a human sacrifice in this world stay human when they go to the Negaverse. She and Nat both admit they don't know everything about the Negaverse, but they have helped me learn some about it. Hiruzen took several breaths thinking to himself and said, Naruto. I admit that I don't know a lot about the overlords or the Negaverse. Most of which I do know I don't like from my encounter with heroes. What are you planning to do, Naruto? Naruto said, Right now Nat has finished building the walls around the courtyard to protect my Tower Heart and are going to start building a castle to defend it next. Hiruzen asked, What is a Tower Heart? Naruto said, Well, you know. I wonder. Gigi, I don't know if this will work or not, but I think I might be able to take you with me to the Negaverse so you can meet Nori and Nat and see the Tower Heart. You want to? Hiruzen pursed his lips and said, What exactly do you think will happen? Naruto said, Well, I was thinking that if my cloths were able to go to the Negaverse with me simply because they were touching me, shouldn't I be able to bring anything I'm holding as well? Hiruzen thought a moment and Naruto said, Hold on a second, Gigi, Nori is talking to me, damn heroes. Nori said that heroes have been known to take slaves they claim as their own from this world to the Negaverse as well as treasures they captured in their quest, so I should have no problem taking you to the Negaverse and back. Hiruzen said, So that's what happened to those people. Very well, I would like to see this Negaverse as well as meet your friends. Naruto held out his hand and Hiruzen took it and Naruto said, Portu. The next moment both were gone. Hiruzen blinked as they both were covered in smoke, and when it cleared he found himself in a huge courtyard with walls around him and Naruto. Nat came over and said, "Ah, master, you have returned so quickly. Are you pleased with the walls we have erected in your honor, my lord?" Naruto looked around and said, "They look nice, but how do you get in and out?" "I don't see a door to get out." Nat said, "Of course not, your lordship. Until we can get more defenses for the tower heart, I won't make a way for someone to get to it so easily." Nori walked over and Hiruzen breathed hitched in his throat as he saw Nori, and Nori said, "Don't let him trick you, your lordship. He was trying to make plans for the castle and forgot to keep an eye on the Browns, and, well, they kind of stupid unless being ordered what to do, and they just completely sealed the walls." Nat frowned and said, "They're Browns, your majesty, what do you expect, but please forgive them. They're hard workers, and I promise that I will keep a better eye on them in the future to make sure they don't screw up again." Hiruzen said, "So you're a minion?" Nat looked at Hiruzen and said, "I am the minion task master selected by his lordship Overlord Naruto, and this is Lady Nori, Lord Naruto concubine." Hiruzen's eyes widened and looked at Naruto and said, "Concubine?" Naruto rubbed the back of his head sheepishly and said, Nori said, "I am whatever his lordship desires me to be. I aim to please and serve him." Hiruzen frowned and said, "Nori, can I ask you a question? Naruto told me that all you remember is your name from when you were living. Is that right?" Nat said, "In some cases that is true. For those who like Lady Nori who is still human, then yes. She would be able to remember her name, but those of us who are minions are given our name by older, more powerful minions since we have no memories of our past life." Hiruzen let out a breath he was holding and said, "Good. I thought you were someone I knew years ago, but her name wasn't Nori." Nori said, "Are you talking about Kushina?" Hiruzen's eyes widened and said, "Yes. You know her." Nori said, "Yes. She was taken prisoner by a hero several years ago. I do not know exactly what happened to her after that, though I did hear that hero was killed by a warlock named Minato who claims she was his wife." Naruto asked, "Who's Kushina Gigi?" Hiruzen bit his lip and said, "An old friend, Naruto. You said that her husband Minato was a warlock." Nat said, "He's known for being a master of runes and is able to do all kinds of magical attacks. I've never seen him myself, but they say that as he walks, flames lick his footsteps. Some say that he may deal with death itself in order to keep his power he had in the mortal world. Who knows? You know how rumors and legends get." Hiruzen thought, "Or that his cloak has flames near his feet," and said, "Yes. I do know. Anyways, I was wondering about this tower heart thing I heard about, and what exactly are you planning to do?" Nat said, "We serve His Majesty, and whatever he decides to do we shall carry out his orders. I suggest that we work on increasing his power and followers, because it won't be long before a hero comes and tries to take his tower heart for themselves or try to destroy his lordship in order to claim his treasure and knowledge." Hiruzen looked at Naruto and said, "So what are you going to do, Naruto?" Naruto said, "Get stronger, Gigi. I don't plan to die for a long time, and I still plan to become Hokage someday." Hiruzen smiled and said, "I see." Naruto said, "Oh, you wanted to see my tower heart? It's right here," as he walked over to the glowing crystal. As Hiruzen walked closer to it, he said, "Amazing. I can feel power coming from it." Nori said, "That is his lordship power. It's amazing to be in its presence. Isn't it?" Hiruzen said, "Indeed it is." Nat said, "That's why heroes will come for it. The power you are feeling is like a drug to power-hungry heroes. The more power they have, the more they want, so they can feel even greater than they are." Hiruzen said, "What happens if the tower heart is taken or destroyed?" Nat said, "If it is taken, then His Majesty will lose his power and become weaker until he is destroyed, and if the tower heart is destroyed, then so will his lordship be destroyed. They are linked. Together they are strong, but separated they are weakened or destroyed. That is why we must defend it to protect His Majesty." And Nori along with the Browns all nod as well at Nat's words. Naruto smiled at how protective everyone was of him, and Hiruzen thought, "You've found acceptance here, Naruto. I'm proud of you and hope someday that you will find it in Konoha as well." Minato, Kushina, and shook his head and said, "Well, I think we should get back to Konoha. I still have a lot of work to do." Naruto said, "Sure, Gigi. Oh, that reminds me, Gigi. I came to ask if you had any books on castles and things like that. Nori thought that I should research on castles before building one so I can better protect my castle heart." Hiruzen said, I think I can find something that should help you. Let's return to my office, shall we? Naruto nods and said, alright Gigi. Bye everyone. Nat said, what should we do while we wait for your return, your lordship, since we can't start working on the castle yet? Naruto frowned and Nori said, if I may suggest, your lordship. You may not have noticed it yet, but you have a lot of area outside of the castle that hasn't been explored or cleared of rubble yet. We may find treasure, relics, or magical items that could help you become stronger or help protect the castle better. Naruto said, that's a great idea, Nat. I want you to send the Browns out to clean up the area around the castle and see what they can find, but don't go past sight of the castle for now. That way, if someone comes to take the heart, they can help get back in time to defend it. Nat said, excellent idea, your lordship. I'll have them get started right away. As he quickly moved over to the Browns and began to order them around. Hiruzen chuckled and said, seems like you got a good man there, Naruto. Nori laughed and Naruto asked, what's so funny, Nori? Nori said, grays and blue are always females while red and browns are always male minions. Green are the only ones that can be both male and female. Females lack physical strength but make up for it with intelligence and magic control, while males are stronger but have less control. Naruto's eyes widened and said, so Nat is a woman, as he looked at the gray minion. Hiruzen chuckled and said, I guess what they say is true no matter where you are. Behind every great man is a woman bossing him around, causing Naruto to chuckle. After calming down, Nori said, is there anything else I can do to please you, Lord Naruto? Naruto looked sheepishly at Hiruzen and said, not right now, Nori. Maybe later. Nori nods and Hiruzen giggled pervertedly and said, Naruto, even though you have Nori here, and no offense to you, Lady Nori, but Naruto needs to remember that he can't spend all his time here and that he has responsibilities back home. He might also try and find someone who will care for him there as well. Nat, who came over, said, of course his lordship is going to find other concubines. He will have several mistresses. Some for power, some for pleasure, and some for other reasons. He will also have to have several heirs to help govern his empire as it grows. Naruto said, whoa, slow down. What do you mean empire? Nat, who everyone now knew was a girl, turned her head to the side and said, how much has the mortal world forgotten about the overlords? Hiruzen frowned and said, what do you mean? Nat said, do you still have the lords of the lands? Hiruzen said, the feudal lords. Nat said, yes. Those feudal lords are all descendants of other overlords who at one time ruled the world. Every time the Shinigami blesses someone to become an overlord, it's because there is a great evil in the world who will try to take over it, and it is the job of the overlord to become strong enough to defeat this evil or die destroying it. Those who succeed in destroying the great evil gain a kingdom for themselves until one of their heirs becomes old enough to take over, and then usually the overlord returns here since they can't die of old age due to the tower heart keeping them alive until some hero comes along and kills them to take their power or their treasure and kingdom. Usually that hero uses the power he gains in killing the overlord to return to the mortal world to try and take over it there, where he is either defeated by the descendant of an overlord or the Shinigami creates a new overlord who will rise in power and destroy the hero, and then the cycle repeats itself. Hiruzen blinked and began to think and said, you know, that suddenly explains so many questions I never could figure out. Naruto frowned and said, so you're saying that I'm supposed to fight some great evil or something? Nat said, in the words of the minion master who named me, evil always finds a way to survive. Humans have the ability to do great and terrible things. Even if you do nothing, sooner or later evil will return. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to sit back and let evil get stronger so more and more people suffer, or are you going to get stronger to defend yourself and those you care about? Hiruzen said, you know, Naruto, I find myself agreeing with Nat. She's saying the same thing I have told you about the will of fire. If you truly want to become Hokage someday, then you will have to become stronger to do so. Naruto said, I guess so. Are you ready to go, Gigi? Hiruzen said, yes. Naruto walked over and grabbed Hiruzen's arm before he said, Portu. Like before, both were covered in smoke and appeared in the Sandame's office, and when they did, Hiruzen frowned and said, enjoying yourself? Both Naruto and Hiruzen saw a young boy sitting in the Hokage seat, and Naruto asked, who is this? As he saw the boy jump out of the seat. Hiruzen said, this is my grandson Konohamaru. Naruto said, I see. Konohamaru said, hey Gramps, how did you do that, and who's this? Hiruzen said, this is Naruto, and that was a special transport jutsu. What are you doing here, Konohamaru? Konohamaru said, Hiruzen sighed and said, I see. Another attempt is it? Konohamaru looked sheepishly as Hiruzen took his seat and said, Naruto, have you had your registration picture taken yet? Naruto shook his head no, and Hiruzen said, then if you don't mind, can you go get that taken care of as well as your registratrian? By the time you do that and go get you something to eat, I should have a couple of books for you about what we were discussing. Naruto nods and said, if you don't mind, can you keep that quiet for now? After hearing what Nat said, I don't want to draw too much attention to myself right now. Hiruzen said, you know Naruto, you seem more mature now than you used to be. Naruto looked out the window and said, I realize life's not a game anymore, Gigi. See you later, Konohamaru. As he left. After he was gone, Hiruzen saw Konohamaru looking at Naruto and began to follow him. Chuckling to himself, he thought, I'm not surprised Konohamaru would find himself drawn to Naruto, but what should I do with this new information? If Minato the Warlock is really Minato, then I had better find a way to make sure Naruto is ready for that information and doesn't turn on Konoha. The last time I saw a hero, it cost the lives of over 200 of my men to take down him. I fear what the power of an Overlord could be, especially when that Overlord is a Jinchuriki for the Kyuubi. After getting his picture taken, Naruto looked at the boy who was hiding behind a flag and said, is there a reason you're hiding, Konohamaru? Konohamaru said, I would expect nothing more than my new boss to detect me. Naruto looked confused and asked, Boss? Why do you call me boss? Konohamaru said, I've seen enough of Grandpa's ninja to know when someone is using a shushin on someone else. You shushin Grandpa, so that means you must be strong if Grandpa let you shushin him. Naruto said, Gigi was just giving an exam to make sure I knew what I was doing with the jutsu. Konohamaru frowned and said, I hadn't thought of that. Naruto said, well, I got to go back to see Gigi about some stuff. Talk to you later, Konohamaru. As he started to leave, Konohamaru said, hey, you want to play ninja with me? Naruto thought a moment and said, sure. Just then a man in glasses wearing a bandana walked up and said, honorable grandson. It's time to go. As he pushed his sunglasses up while shooting a sneer at Naruto. Naruto frowned and thought, glare all you want, bastard. I'll prove you and everyone else wrong someday. As he said, good luck, Konohamaru, as he turned and walked away. After leaving Konohamaru, Naruto returned to the Sandaime office and entered it. Once inside, the Sandaime said, Naruto, right on time. I got some books for you I think you and your friends should look at, as he pointed to a stack of 10 books. Naruto walked over and read the title. Castles and Fortress of the World. Greatest Battles in History Volume 1. Greatest Battles in History Volume 2. Greatest Battles in History Volume 3. History of the Elemental Nations. Knights, Mages, and Priestess. Kingdoms of the World. Demons and Monsters of Legends. A Beginner's Guide to Seals. Seals for Idiots. Looking confused at the book titles, Hiruzen said, the Book of Castles and Fortress of the World gives descriptions about the castles. Greatest Battles in History tells several stories about attacks on towns, outposts, and villages which can help you defend your castle by seeing how others would attack yours in order to counter them. The book on the history of the elemental along with the Kingdom of the Worlds will help you understand the political situation you are in. I can tell you're not used to the terms of people referring to you as nobility, so those books will help you with that. The book on Knights, Mages and Priestess along with the book on Demon and Monsters of Legends are books that I have read looking for information on heroes as well as what few things I know about overlords and the Negaverse. The other 2 books are about seals. When I heard about Minato and his runes, I thought that they are similar to our seals. I thought that if nothing else would give you something to look out for. Naruto smiled and said, thanks Gigi, but when are you going to tell me the truth? Hiruzen said, what do you mean? Naruto frowned and said, a guy named Minato who made a deal with the Shinigami. Someone whose wife is named Kushina that looks like someone you know and I bet looks like Minato wife. I saw the look on your face. It's him. Isn't it? It's the Yondaime. Hiruzen sighed and said, Naruto. I don't know. It might be. Part of me hopes it is because I know that you want to speak with him about where you came from and about who your parents are. But there is no guarantee that it is him or that he actually does remember things from when he was alive. I would hate that it actually be him and you meet him and not remember what you want to speak with him about. Also, there is the fact that since people change when they get there, that he may not be who he was when he was the Yondaime. He could be as bad or worse than a hero. Please, Naruto. Until you know more about what it is like there as well as getting stronger, do not seek him out. Naruto, seeing the worried look on Hiruzen's face, said, "Alright, Gigi. I won't seek him out for now, but why are you so accepting with this?" "I mean," Hiruzen said, "I saw the look on your face around Nori and Nat. I know that with everything you went through that odds are you would choose them over Konoha because unlike the people here, they respect you and you seem happy with them. I care for you, Naruto, and I don't want to see the day where you become an enemy of Konoha, and if you left Konoha to be with them now that you're a ninja, there would be nothing I could do to keep you from becoming a missing nin and treated as such." Naruto said, "Someday I'll prove to everyone who I really am. Just wait and see, Gigi." Hiruzen said, "I hope you do, and I hope to be there to see that day," as he rubbed Naruto's hair affectionately as Naruto stood beside his desk. Naruto said, "Well, Gigi, I guess I should go." Hiruzen said, "I know, though I do have one more thing for you," as he pulled out a scroll. Naruto looked at the scroll and Hiruzen said, "This is a couple of training exercises that will help you get stronger. You should look at them and do them." Naruto said, "Thanks, Gigi." Hiruzen said, "Don't forget you have to be at the academy next Monday at 10 a.m. for team placements." Naruto nods and said, "Sure, Gigi. Well, I guess I better go. See ya, Portu." Before he disappeared. After he was gone, Hiruzen thought, please let this help form a bond here and not create a stronger enemy. When Naruto got back to the Negaverse, he saw Nori reading a scroll and saw a small pile of gold and a couple of old-looking clubs and daggers. Nat said, "Ah, Your Excellency, you've returned. I am pleased to inform you that we have cleared the area around the castle as far as a minion can see, and we have found some gold for your treasury as well as a few old weapons that you of course have first dibs on, and a scroll that Lady Nori has been reading." Naruto said, "I can see that, Nat. Good job." Nat said, "I see you have some new items, my lord. Are they to help with the castle?" Naruto said, "Yes. Gigi said these would help with helping to build the castle as well as give several strategies that others would use to attack the castle so that we may defend against them. I haven't had a chance to look through them yet, so we." Nat said, "Not to worry, my lord." As she began to speak some words Naruto did not understand before the books began to float into the air and fly around the tower hard while glowing. Grunting, Naruto grabbed his head and screamed in pain before passing out. When Naruto awoke, he groaned and moved his hand to his head and said, "What happened?" Nat said, "Forgive me, Your Excellency. I was not aware of the amount of knowledge in those books, or I would have done them all one at a time." Naruto glared at Nat and said, "What did you do, and why the hell do I suddenly know what was in those books?" Nat said, "I used an enchantment that the minion master who named me used when to enchant the library of her master. It allows all the knowledge that is stored in the library to be given to her master without wasting time reading them." Naruto said, "I see. Next time before you do something like that, warn me so I can be prepared for all that information to be absorbed." Nat said, "Of course, Your Excellency. If I might ask your lordship, now that you know everything in those books, how shall we build your castle?" Naruto pursed his lips together a moment and said, "Are the walls around the courtyard just stone walls, or are they enforced any?" Nat said, "Just stone from the rubble we cleared, master." Naruto said, "That won't do well. If someone uses a battering ram, they would be able to break the walls. We need to reinforce the walls with as well as make them where we can place guards there to watch for enemies, but that will be later. Do any of you have blacksmithing skills?" Nat frowned and said, "No, my lord. None of the minions here have blacksmithing skills." Naruto frowned and said, "Damn, do you know anyone who blacksmiths?" Nat said, "I do, but is currently out of reach." Nori said, "I know someone, but I can't guarantee that they would help. They may even attack you." Naruto frowned and said, "Why would they attack me?" Nori said, "Because you might not be able to afford them." Nat asked, "Who are you speaking about?" Nori said, "The Grey Dwarfs. They are the best blacksmiths outside the elves that I know of, and they are also the closest to our current location." Nat frowned and said, "You're right. The Grey Dwarfs are the best, and they won't work for the amount of gold we currently have." Naruto said, "Damn, I guess we will either have to get more gold or do without what I want." Nat said, "Not necessarily, master. The dwarfs may be greedy, but they are also honorable creatures. If you challenge the leader of the dwarfs to a battle of honor, then it might be possible to have the leader give you one of their blacksmiths." Naruto said, "But why would they accept a battle with me?" Nat said, "The dwarfs don't know how powerful you are yet or how rich you are. You can go and challenge them to a battle and offer them all your gold and weapons if they win, but if they lose then they have to give you one of their blacksmiths as a servant. Naruto frowned and said, very well. It's a necessary evil. And thought, of course if I didn't know that this kind of thing happens a lot in the world from those books Gigi gave me then I wouldn't do this. And said, where are these dwarfs? Nori said, if you wish my lord, I can lead you. Naruto said, very well. Nat said, my lord, take the Browns with you. I shall stay and guard the tower heart. Naruto frowned and said, no. I'll do this myself for now Nat. You need them to stay here and help you dig into the ground and begin looking for metal to use. Nat said, are you planning to put a dungeon or catacombs master? Naruto said, yes, as well as a maze that can be used to lure enemies into that can be used to trap them. Nat said, very well my lord, but please be careful. Naruto nods and said, shall we Nori? Nori nods and Naruto said, hey wait, how do we get out of here? Nat said, oh, well we built a secret tunnel to get in and out my lord. It's over here. As she moved over and motioned to a couple of Browns who moved a stone slab to the side and both Naruto and Nori followed Nat into the tunnel and came out the other side which came out inside a hollow tree and Naruto frowned and said, that isn't going to work Nat. Once we get the blacksmith and begin building the castle I want you to destroy this tunnel. Nat said, yes my lord. Is there anything else? Naruto shook his head no and said, so which way do we go Nori? Nori said, this way my lord. As she began to walk away. After walking for 10 minutes Naruto stopped and said, what the hell? What is this gray shit that is in front of us? Nori looked at Naruto confused before her eyes widened and said, oh, forgive me my lord. You remember how I told you about your tower heart energy spreading out and bathing those close to it in it? Well this is currently the range of your power. Since you are still alive the area past that ring of influence is blind to you. I hadn't thought to explain how to extend your range of power. Remember how you first created your tower heart? Well you can extend your power reach by finding another item like a giant boulder or a tree or something of decent size and send your energy into it. That will create a tower beacon that will link to the tower heart and extend your range. If you acquire a detection spell and place it on the map in your map room once it's built if anyone enters the range of your power it will appear on your map to warn you of their approach. Naruto asked, how do you know so much Nori? Nori said, I've been here for many years and I listen to others and learn from them. Naruto said, makes sense I guess, so all I have to do is place some energy into an object like that tree there. Nori nods and Naruto walked over to a tree and sent some chakra into it and the tree began to glow before it changed into a silver pole and the gray fog area that was in front of Naruto began to move back before disappearing. Naruto said, that's cool. So shall we continue to the dwarfs? Nori said, yes your lordship. As she began leading Naruto away again. 6 hours later and 10 tower beacons, Naruto and Nori stood in front of a cave with a door with strange writing on it. Naruto looked at Nori and asked, what now? Nori said, are you sure you wish to do this your lordship? I mean I know you're young but are you sure you will be able to defeat a dwarf? Naruto said, I don't know. Never met one before so I can't say for sure I can or not. But I need a blacksmith so I have to do this. Nori sighed and spoke something in a language Naruto didn't know and the door glowed before opening. Naruto eyes widened and said, damn, things here are so cool. What was that? Nori said, the elf language. A friend of mine taught it to me when I first arrived here. Shall we my lord? Naruto nods and took the lead and it wasn't long before several short men with long beards and big noses wearing armor appeared blocking the path and one began to speak in a language Naruto did not understand. Nori stepped forward and began to speak in the same language also and Naruto thought, damn, I wish I knew what they were saying. After several minutes the men grunted and Nori said, they have agreed to take us to see their leader your lordship. Naruto said, good, I just wish I knew what you were all saying. Nori said, I don't speak the dwarf language but most racists speak the elvish language. Naruto said, I see. Can you teach me? Nori said, I'm afraid that only an elf can teach someone the elvish language. I don't know how to explain it sire. All I can guess is that it is a spell that only they know. Naruto frowned until his eyes widened as they came into a large cavern city with hundreds of dwarves across a bridge that connected the tunnel they came out of to the city. One of the two men who escorted them quickly ran into the city while the other stood in front of Naruto and Nori with his arms crossed. Nori stopped walking and Naruto who looked at Nori who said, The other guard went to the leader of the dwarfs. Naruto nods and crossed his arms and began to look at the city. A few minutes later several men came walking out in armor along with a very old-looking man with white hair, and the man with white hair moved forward and began to speak. Nori began to speak back to him and the old man's eyes widened, as did several others before the old man began to speak again. Nori began to speak aggressively toward the elderly man while several of the dwarfs grabbed their weapon and glared at Naruto, who looked at Nori, who continued to speak heatedly. Naruto said, "What's being said, Nori?" Nori turned to Naruto and said, "The elder didn't believe your claim that you are an overlord. I was just merely explaining to him that you are." Hearing the old man speak again, Nori turned back to him and spoke very aggressively toward him, and the old man raised his voice, silencing Nori as well as making all the dwarfs to look at him. The old man pointed a finger at Naruto and spoke in a serious tone, and Naruto asked, "What does he say, Nori?" Nori took a deep breath and said, "He is asking if this is what you really want." Naruto nods his head yes, and the old man spoke again and turned to look behind him, and a dwarf in red armor stepped forward onto the bridge while the old man spoke while pointing at him. Nori frowned and said, "That is the elder's son, my lord. The elder said that you and he will battle. If you defeat him, he will agree to your request, but if you fail, he will kill me." Naruto's eyes widened and looked at Nori and hissed, "What?" Nori said, "He didn't believe that you are an overlord and was going to kill you for your claim. I argued with him to prove that you really was an overlord. In our argument I made a deal with him. You fight his strongest warrior. If you defeat him, then he will acknowledge you as an overlord and give you one of their dwarf's blacksmith as a servant. If you fail to defeat his strongest warrior though, then his strongest warrior will kill you in battle and then kill me after," as she looked scared and away from Naruto. Naruto narrowed his eyes and said, "After what, Nori?" Nori looked down and said, "After he uses me to sedate his bloodlust." Naruto growled and said, "Over my dead body." As he walked past Nori onto the bridge, glaring at the dwarf he was supposed to fight, who pulled out a pair of battle axe off his back. Naruto growled and said, "Nori, translate word for word what I am about to say." Nori said, "Yes, sire." Naruto glared at the man in front of him and said, "You doubting my claim as an overlord is one thing. You have not seen my strength of battle or character, and I can forgive that." Naruto's eyes began to turn from blue to red as red chakra began to slowly come off Naruto's body as the whisker marks on his cheek expanded and his pupils became slit, and Naruto said, "But threatening to harm those who are my subjects, especially one who is special to me, cannot be forgive. I'll prove to you once and for all that I am the overlord as I destroy this fool." Ki was coming off Naruto's body at this point as all the dwarfs began to look at Naruto in fear as Nori translated Naruto's words but felt herself blushing as she saw and felt Naruto's protective presence. The armored dwarf who was looking at Naruto began to back up away from Naruto, but Naruto disappeared from view, and the next moment Naruto held the dwarf over the side of the bridge, which the bottom of could not be seen, by his neck, glaring at him while the dwarf was choking to death from not being able to breathe. The dwarf leader quickly began to scream at Naruto, and Nori said, "Sire, the leader is begging you to spare his son's life. He begs for your forgiveness and will do anything." Naruto looked at the elder and said, "Anything?" Nori quickly translated and the elder nods, and Naruto said, "He along with all his people now serve me and will do as I command. Either he agrees to become my subjects and I will spare his son's life, or he refuses and I kill his son and make his people my slaves." Naruto saw the elder close his eyes before getting on his knees and bowing to Naruto. Naruto, seeing this through the leader's son, he was choking on the ground in front of the elderly dwarf, and said, "Tell him to have his blacksmiths to come to my kingdom and assist my minions in building my castle. Tell him also to bring all his people's treasure, spells, armor, and weapons." The elder quickly began to speak after hearing Nori translate, and Nori said, "He said that will leave his people with nothing." Naruto said, "Tell him that his arrogance and pride he had from having those items is what put him in this situation to begin with. I am allowing him to keep his people alive, their homes to live in, as well as food to feed their people with so they may live. They have forgotten what is really important. A leader is responsible for protecting and caring for his people, not filling their pockets with gold. Gold will not remember you once you're dead or once you spend it. Weapons and armor will fall to the ground useless if the person using it cares more about their own self than the people they are fighting to protect." Naruto let Nori finish translating and saw the look on all the dwarfs' face as they heard Naruto words, and Naruto saw the guard who had ran in to contact the elder get down on one knee and place his fist over his heart, and he began to speak. Nori translated and said, Overlord, you are a powerful warrior and an honorable leader, allow me to serve you as your subject. After Nori translated, several others began to also repeat what the guard did, as more and more began to do it. Before everyone in the village was kneeled before Naruto, and the leader of the dwarf and his son both bowed completely on the ground after seeing their people's actions, and the elder spoke. Nori translated, Please forgive me for my pride and arrogance and allow me and my people to serve you not as slaves but as loyal subjects. All we have is yours. Naruto said, So be it. The next day Nat was overseeing the work of the Browns when the sound of marching feet was heard approaching the castle walls. Nat quickly ordered the Browns to grab weapons to defend the tower hard, as she also grabbed some. A few minutes later the walls around the castle crumbled to the ground on one side. When the dust from the wall falling cleared, Nat and the other minions got wide-eyed as they saw Naruto and Nori standing beside several dwarfs who were armed, and Naruto was pointing at the destroyed wall with Nori translating, and the dwarfs began speaking back and Naruto nods before the dwarfs began to move around, knocking down the rest of the walls. Nat moved toward Naruto after ordering the Browns to remain guarding the heart, and Nat said, My lord, what is going on? Naruto shrugged and said, Nothing much. I picked up a few new subjects to aid my kingdom. Nat looked around as she saw more and more dwarfs and asked, How many are a few? Naruto shrugged and said, 300, give or take a couple. Nat's eyes widened before she smiled and said, I knew you were going to be a great overlord, sire. Nori said, You have no idea, Nat. No idea at all. As she blushed while looking at Naruto, who had several live bites on his neck from her showing him her thanks and gratitude for his actions the previous day. Naruto smirked as he heard Nori words before his eyes widened and said, That reminds me, Nat, as he turned and motioned to a group of dwarfs who were not moving. The group began to move toward Naruto before he said, Can you help these dwarfs place these items in their proper places? As the dwarfs set down several treasure chests and opened them, showing gold, weapons, armor, books, scrolls, and other items. Nat's eyes widened and said, Oh my. Before she fainted in shock, causing both Naruto and Nori to look at each other and burst out laughing. Naruto was sweating as he went through the training exercise that Hiruzen had wrote for him. Several hundred yards away, construction of his castle as well as the first steps in forming a city were underway. Using the knowledge from the books Hiruzen gave him, as well as his knowledge he gained from pranks on Konoha, Nat knowledge from her time with the Grey who named her, as well as Tinbert, the leader of the dwarfs, the plans for the castle were created. The walls around the courtyard that now was twice the size the one the Browns had made originally was built first. They were now 10 feet thick and 50 feet height. Each wall was reinforced with 3 separate sets of metal rods that were linked together to make it stronger. There was a gateway with a drawbridge as well as a spiked metal gate with 1 foot wide gaps between each section. On each side of the gate was a guard house with one guard house controlling the drawbridge while another guard house controlled the metal gate. The walls had stone spikes on each side of the walls so that if anyone were to attack the guards on top of the walls, the guards could hide behind the spikes and then counter-attack when they could if they had a long-range weapon. At each corner of the castle walls that was in a square shape around the courtyard was a watchtower that went a total of 20 feet higher than the castle walls. In the middle of each wall was also a guard house that was the same height as the watchtowers. On top of each watchtower was a catapult that could be used to launch boulders at enemy armies. With the help of storage seals that Naruto learned from the book the Sandaime gave him. Each catapult had 50 boulders that were around 6 feet wide that could be launched one at a time. On each boulder was an exploding seal that would activate, causing it to explode, sending shrapnel into anyone around the area when it hit the ground. The walls also had single guard house between each watchtower and between the watchtower and the gate houses that could hold up to 30 men easily, while the gate houses could hold 15 men and the watchtower could hold 40 men, since living area for future guards were set up in each of them. Outside the castle walls, the ground that once was cleared now looked like a strip mining operation, as a moat over 40 feet deep and 30 feet wide now existed in the ground from where stones and metals were dug up to be used in construction. The courtyard itself had the beginning of the castle started in it, with the castle outside walls now being 200 yards wide, while the distance between the castle walls and the courtyard walls was another 300 yards from each other in every direction. As Naruto got up off the ground from doing push-ups, he saw a dwarf came running in his direction, and the dwarf went to one knee and said, Your Majesty, Lady Nori has sent me to inform you that someone has arrived at the castle to speak with you. Naruto blinked and said, Who is it that wishes to speak with me? The dwarf said, It's the warlock Minato. Naruto's eyes widened and he paled slightly and thought, What's going on? Why is he here? I think I should get Gigi. And said, inform Nori I will be there shortly. I wish to freshen up a little before meeting our guest since I was training. Naruto watched as the dwarf nods and runs back to the castle and Naruto said, Portu, before he disappeared in a puff of smoke. Naruto appeared in the Sandame office who went wide-eyed a moment as did the other people in his office and the Sandame frowned and said, Naruto, not that I'm not glad to see you but as you can see I am in a very impor. Naruto interrupted Hiruzen and said, it's him Gigi. He came looking for me. In a scared tone. Hiruzen blinked and asked, who Naruto? Naruto looked nervous while the others in the room looked between Naruto and the Sandame and one of them said, Hiruzen, shouldn't you send this boy away so we can continue our meeting and Naruto turned and said, look, I know this meeting is probably important since I know you're the elders of Konoha but Gigi told me to avoid the guy who came looking for me. He gave me specific orders to avoid this guy. Do you understand? Specific orders to avoid him. Hiruzen's eyes widened as he realized who Naruto was speaking about and paled and said, are you sure Naruto? Naruto said, yes, Nori stalling him right now but I don't know how long she can keep him busy and I can't leave her and the others there to get hurt if he's. Hiruzen said, that's enough Naruto. I understand. You did the right thing by coming to me. Homaru, Kaharu, I am afraid that I am going to have to cancel this meeting short. Kaharu seeing the look on Hiruzen's face and said, Hiruzen, as one of the elder of Konoha I am forced to ask that you inform us what is going on because. Hiruzen said, enough Kaharu. I know that you have a right to know what is going on but. Naruto said, it. As a cage bunshin appeared beside both elders and Hiruzen and all four Naruto in the room said, Portu. And the room was covered in smoke. When the smoke cleared no one was in the Hokage office. As the group arrived in Naruto Castle, the two elders blinked and looked around wide-eyed seeing themselves in a place they never been before while Hiruzen frowned and said, you need to learn patience Naruto. Naruto said, well sorry but time moved different here and I'm not sure how much time has passed. Nat. Naruto shouted loudly. The elders went wide-eyed as they saw Nat come running from the side of the courtyard and both reached for hidden weapons when Hiruzen placed his hands on Their's shoulders causing both to turn and look at him and Hiruzen said, I'll explain later but do not do anything stupid. She is an ally for now. Nat who had come running excitedly when she heard Naruto shout stopped in front of Naruto and said, Your Excellency, you have returned. Lady Nori is currently with the warlock waiting for you. Naruto bit his lip and looked at Hiruzen who said, Nat, would you please escort us to see him? Nat looked from Hiruzen to Naruto who nods and said, right this way sire. As she began to lead them away and Hiruzen placed his hand on Naruto's shoulder and said, relax Naruto. Naruto said, how can I relax when I know that I might die in a few minutes? Both elders went wide-eyed hearing Naruto words and both looked at Hiruzen who said, all will be explained soon. Just keep your eyes open and mouths closed. As they followed Nat who entered one of the doors that lead to one of the guard towers and Hiruzen said, you've been busy Naruto. Naruto smiled slightly and said, yeah, after I returned and had the knowledge of those books you gave me shoved into my head, I knew the old walls wouldn't work so after speaking with Nat and Nori I learned about the dwarfs who are master blacksmiths and I went to meet them and, you could say the rest is history, as he rubbed his head. Hiruzen said, I see, well I am impressed with what you have done. Nat stopped in front of a door and said, in here my lord. Naruto nods and Nat opened the door and both Kaharu and Homaru eyes widened as they saw who was standing in the room while Hiruzen bit his lip. There in the room was Minato, Kushina, Tinbird, and Nori. Nori seeing Naruto said, ah, your lordship. You returned. Kushina looked at the group curiously while Minato had his eyes glued on Naruto as he stood outside the door and Hiruzen said, I'm told that you might not remember your life. Do you? Minato interrupted him and said, I remember you Hiruzen as well as you Kaharu and Homaru. Hello Naruto. Naruto gulped and said, hi. Minato turned to Kushina who said, Minato, is he? Minato nods and Kushina turned and said, hello, son. Naruto eyes widened before he said, son. What? As he looked at everyone in the room in shock. Hiruzen sighed and said, Naruto. This is your mother Kushina Uzumaki and her husband, your father, Minato Namikaze. Naruto eyes went wide before they rolled into the back of his head as he passed out. When Naruto opened his eyes he found himself in his room with Nori resting her head on his shoulder and Naruto rubbed his head and said, what happened? Nori hearing Naruto words said, Sire, you're awake. Naruto said, not so loud Nori. My head is killing me right now. Nori said, you did hit your head pretty hard when you collapsed sire. Naruto blinked and looked and asked, what happened? Nori said, you met your parents and passed out sire. Tinbird has spread the word that you are the son of the warlock and their respect for you has only increased. Naruto groaned and said, damn it, why, I can't think straight right now. Nori placed her hand on his chest and said, just calm down and take a few breaths to clear your head sire. Naruto did as Nori suggested and said, thank you Nori. I feel a little calmer now. I need to speak with Gigi. Can you please get him for me? Nori nods and said, by your command sire. As she got up and quickly left the room. Naruto got up and moved to the small slit in the room that allowed sunlight and fresh air into the room and sat down looking outside. A few minutes later there was a knock on the door to his room before it opened and Hiruzen stepped in and closed the door and he said, I know you have many questions and I can only guess what you're feeling Naruto. I'll tell you everything and then tell you why I didn't inform you sooner if you will remain calm and listen to me. Naruto frowned and said, Gigi. I feel betrayed and don't know how I can trust you or what you say anymore. Why didn't you tell me? Hiruzen said, your father had a lot of enemies in the world. You know how people react to you because of the Kyuubi. That made your life hard, I know, but most of those respected me and my position enough not to actually harm you physically. There was nothing I could do about the emotional damage they were doing to you besides try and be there for you and become a grandfather figure for you to give you the best life I could. But if I would have told you who your parents were or told the village who your parents were then other nations would have sent assassin after you and unlike the people of Konoha they wouldn't have listened to me. I did everything I could in order to protect you and try to let you live as normal a life as I could. I admit I made mistakes but no matter how powerful I am or what position I have I will sometimes make a mistake. Sometimes it costs someone to feel pain and suffering, sometimes it sends people to their death. All I can do is do what I think is best and pray that I did the right thing. Naruto who had turned to look at him looked back out the window and said, were you ever going to tell me about my parents or the Kyuubi? Hiruzen said, I had planned to tell you about the Kyuubi when you made Genin and tell you about your parents when you made Chunin so you could better defend yourself should your parents' enemies find out. Mizuki just beat me on telling about the Kyuubi and you haven't gotten strong enough to be Chunin yet. Naruto sighs feeling a lot of his anger at Hiruzen fade and said, why did he use me to seal the Kyuubi in? Hiruzen said, there are several reasons he used you. The first is he is an honorable man. He could not ask someone else to do something if he himself was not willing to do it first. The next reason is because the Uzumaki clan which I was going to tell you about when I informed you about your parents had a special chakra that makes it where they are perfect to become Jinchurikis. The Shadaime Hokage wife, Mito Uzumaki Senju was Kyuubi first Jinchuriki and your own mother was the second Jinchuriki for the Kyuubi. Something happened the night you were born that caused your mother to release the Kyuubi. I don't know what it was but Minato has said he will explain it when you are present because he said he has much to talk to you about. Naruto, I'm not going to ask you to forgive your father but I ask that you give him a chance to explain himself to you. Naruto closed his eyes and said, Can I have a few minutes alone? I need to think. Hiruzen nods and said, Naruto. No matter what happens or what you do know that I am proud of you. Before he turns and leaves the room. Hiruzen returned to the room where Minato, Kaharu, Homaru, Kushina, Nori and Tinbird were all sitting round a table and Minato asked, how is he? Hiruzen said, he's confused Minato. I did my best to make his life as normal as I could but the emotional pain that he has been forced to endure is more than many of those who took their own lives after the last war ended. Tinbird said, if I may ask Warlock, why have you come here now? Naruto who stepped into the room said, that is what I would like to know also. Everyone turned and saw Naruto whose face looked to be made of stone with how emotionless it was. Minato said, the night you were born, a masked man attacked your mother and me. He used you as a hostage and threw you in the air with an exploding tag on your baby blanket. I rescued you but in the moment it took for me to rescue you, the masked man took your mother and released the Kyuubi on Konoha. I'll skip talking about the man for now because it's not important to know besides the man is still alive and he retreated when I fought him to rescue your mother. Your mother and I were able to stop Kyuubi rampage and I summoned the Shinigami to aid me in sealing not only the Kyuubi in you but also your mother's soul so that when the time was right she could meet you and aid you in learning to use the Kyuubi power. I also sealed a piece of my own soul just in case the seal ever broke so I could reset it to save you. The jutsu I used said that I would be sealed away forever in the Shinigami stomach as payment for summoning him. What happened is far worse. Hiruzen said, "What do you mean, Minato?" Minato said, "I don't know how much you know about this world, but time here passes different than it does the world you all live in. For every minute there 4 minutes pass here. For you it has been 14 years since I fought the Kyuubi. For me it's been 56 years." Everyone's eyes widened and Minato said, "In that time I've learned a lot about this world as well as many secrets about the world you are all from. One thing you should know is when a person dies, based on what their lives were like, their bodies are changed. Tinbird here as well as Nat are perfect examples of what I mean, but one important thing to know is when a person dies in the human world they forget everything they knew when they are reborn here with the exception of some know their name. Not all but some. When the Shinigami sent me here he made it where I can't die and also made it where I remember everything from the human world." You all saw Kushina look at Naruto earlier with confusion. The reason she was confused because she has no memory of her life in the human world, and besides what I told her knows nothing about being Naruto mother, she also didn't know me. Imagine living in a world where everyone who knew you can't remember you. All these years I've gathered info on everything about this world I could, trying to learn how to find my wife and son. It was through this searching that I found a way to have Naruto in my life again as well as his mother, but to do it I had to bring Naruto here. Everyone's eyes widened and Naruto said, "You brought me here." Minato said, "Yes. I learned how to make someone an overlord by researching a man the elemental nations knows as the Six Realm Sage, but to those here he was known as the King of the Six Kingdoms." Everyone's eyes widened but for different reasons and Homaru said, "What does he have to do with anything?" Minato said, "Many years ago, there was a creature of pure evil whose name in this world was long forgotten, but in the human world he was called the Kyuubi. Kyuubi devoured everyone and everything in its path of destruction and would have most likely destroyed all life in both worlds had it not been for the actions of one." Minato took a sip of water and said, "Before the sage first appeared when a person was born, another version of them was born here and looked human, and based on the life they lived in the other world would change them to look like other creatures. The sage's twin, you could say, that lived in this world feared being killed by the Kyuubi and began to search for a way to save himself. He learned of a way to flee from this world to the human world where he met his other self. When he did, he explained to his other self about the Kyuubi and figured the only way to survive was to combine their knowledge and power. They both went to a shrine maiden who used her spiritual powers to merge both of them together. Now think of this. In this world physical bodies mean very little because basically everything here is connected to the spirit. Now in the human world it's reverse, but when you mix both physical and spiritual energy, what do you get?" Koharu said, "Chakra." Minato nods before he yawned and said, "Sorry, haven't slept in nearly a week. Anyways, as I was saying, the sage now had the ability to use chakra and with his combined knowledge from both worlds made all the magic and spirit-based jutsu from this world magnified many times over. With this knowledge he was able to battle the Kyuubi and kill it, but you can't truly kill a spirit. All you can do is change it, store it, or absorb it, so he sealed it into his own body, turning him into the first Jinchuriki. But also making him immortal, and I don't mean he can't be killed. I mean that he would never die of old age when I say immortal. He became a god in human form to both this world and the human world, and he began to teach humans how to connect with their spiritual side more, giving them the ability to use chakra, but this changed their spirit. Instead of having a human-like twin in this world when you are born, your spirit form has been changed into what this world calls minions, which is what Nat here is," as he pointed to Nat. Homaru said, "Are you saying that when we die that we become that?" pointing at Nat. Minato said, "No, what I am saying is that while you are living in the human world, you spirit form that lives here as a minion. Now the only reason I am telling you this is because I have searched this world and I found my son's minion. Shinigami, when he told me my punishment, turned the shard of my soul in Naruto into a tower heart, and no, I'm not explaining what a tower heart is. Anyways, I figured out a way to summon my tower heart to this world, and since it was sealed inside Naruto I was able to bring him here, and when he arrived he was asleep, so I merged his minion with him similar to the Six Realm Sage did, which is kind of ironic since Naruto is one of his descendants." Tinbird screamed, "What?" while Nat looked like she just won the lottery. Minato said, "The sage had 2 sons. He had decided to live in this world with his wife and have his sons live in the human world to keep an eye on it. His eldest son had become corrupted with the fame and glory he had being the son of the world's savior and was a glory hog. The sage youngest son was more humble though and treated people with respect and wanted to live in peace. Because of this the sage chose his youngest son to lead the human world. He became the first overlord. The eldest son became furious and he returned to this world and got his revenge by killing his father and absorb his spiritual energy. He then captured several species of creatures who were loyal to his father and used that energy to turn those creatures into what we would later call the Biju and release them on the human world so that he could battle them for glory and honor and become the new savior of the world. Thus he became the first hero. Minato took another sip of water and said, the hero had two sons with different women. One became the ancestor of the Uchiha clan while the other became the ancestor of the Hyuga clan. The Overlord also has two sons and one became the ancestor to the Senju clan and the other the Uzumaki clan. The Overlord killed the hero and then the hero's sons vowed revenge and later killed the Overlord but then turned on each other wanting the power of the Overlord for themselves. The son of the Overlord killed them but as you can guess their children wanted revenge so the Hyuga and Uchiha rivalry began as well as the Senju Uchiha rivalry. The Hyuga were smart enough to back out after the Senju and Uzumaki were going to stay united and they did all the way up to the founding of Konoha and now Naruto is the last of the true Overlord line and now thanks to me bringing him here and merging him he can become what he was meant to be. Hiruzen said, so Naruto is a descendant of the Six Realm Sage on both his parents' side. Minato blinked and said, both, what do you mean both? Hiruzen said, your father was Nawaki Senju, Suon brother. Your mother was the female genin on his team. She missed the mission he was killed on because she had morning sickness from being pregnant. She died giving birth to you. The only two people who knew were Mito Uzumaki Senju and myself which is why Whirlpool sent a female to seal the Kyuubi into and why I kept arranging for you both to be teamed up and you were part of the team sent to rescue her when she was kidnapped. You both had an arranged marriage but Mito and I didn't want to tell you and instead let you fall in love for yourself which you did. Minato said, how can you be sure who my mother and father were? Hiruzen said, because your mother was my firstborn daughter. Thud. Naruto passed out again as his mind just took in the info that he received. When Naruto awoke again he found himself back in his bed in the castle and Naruto felt someone rubbing their hand through his head and said, Nori, is that you? A female voice said, no son. Naruto eyes widened before jumping out of bed and looking over seeing Kushina sitting next to where he had been before and he said, Kushina. Kushina said, after you passed out your father used a seal he created to return my soul to my new body. While my soul was inside you I saw everything that happened in your life son so I know everything. I'm not the shell of a woman you met earlier. I truly am your mother in every way now. Naruto eyes widened before they began to get wet and he said in a scared voice, really? You're telling the truth, right? Kushina said, of course Databane. Before she looked sheepish. Naruto screamed, Mom. Before he tackled her into the bed and hugged her as he cried into her chest. Kushina patted his back and whispered, it's alright son, mommy here and I'm not going anywhere, as she heard him cry into her chest until he fell asleep. Getting up out of bed she went to the door where she opened it and saw Nori standing there and Kushina narrowed her eyes and said, I know who you really are Nori as does Minato. If you hurt Naruto I'll destroy you. Nori said, I won't hurt him. I give you my word. Kushina nods and started to walk away and stopped and said, I want you to tell him the truth before he discovers it on his own. Also he's too young to be a father right now. Nori eyes got wide hearing Kushina words before she looked down with a frown on her face but hearing the last part made her blush as she looked back up at Kushina who looked over her shoulder and said, take care of him, before she walked away. Nori thought, I will. As she returned to the room where Naruto was. When Kushina got back to the room where the Sandame, Kaharu, Homaru, Nat, and Tinbird were Homaru said, how many other secrets are you going to hide Hiruzen? Hiruzen said, more than you can imagine. I expect both of you to take what you learned here to the grave. Naruto is going to prove himself, not because of who he is related to. Minato said, I agree. Grandpa. As he shot Hiruzen a glare. Hiruzen said, like I told Naruto, I made a lot of mistakes in my life Minato. I can only do my best and pray that I made the right choice. Kaharu said, something I've been wonder. Why did you get that smile on your face when you heard Naruto was the descendant of the sage Nat? Nat said, well you see. Minions all start out with brown skin and are called browns. Browns are generally referred to as males because browns are very stupid and you can't tell the difference in genders then. Browns are abusive to each other to the point they do more damage to each other than an enemy would. Eventually most browns grow to hate being beat on so much. Some decide to hide as best they can, which causes the browns to look for them, and if they find them, beat them up again, so they try harder and harder each time to avoid being found or detected until they become master of stealth, though by this point they also quit bathing so that if they are found the browns won't beat them because they stink so bad. Those who do this turn into what we call greens, and because they have hidden in places that smell bad to help hide them as well as cause them to stink, they build up an immunity to nearly all poisons. Nat rubbed her head and said, some browns who try to hide can't stand the smell of becoming a green, so they try another approach. Browns are so stupid that they don't know how to swim and are afraid to get too wet. To avoid being hurt, some browns force themselves to learn to swim and keep getting better out of fear that they eventually become what we call blues, who can go through any amount of water regardless of how dangerous it is. They also learn to attack with spells in long range so they don't have to get out of water where they could be hurt. Nat popped her knuckles and said, then you have reds. Reds are basically pyromaniacs. They burn themselves playing with fire for the fun of it until they build up an immunity to fire, and then they like to use magic to make fireballs and set things on fire. Because of being burned so much and becoming immune to fire, their skin color turns red. Last are grays like me. Nat rubbed her neck and said, grays also start out as browns but don't like to be hurt, so search out knowledge to learn to avoid and detect danger. Because of this we spend so much time inside researching and reading our skin color changes to gray. We are the smartest of all the minions. Minions who live a long life try to make it where they don't have to change into another creature when their human side dies. Minions have learned that if they stay by an overlord's tower heart, they can absorb some of the energy the tower heart gives off to extend their lives. Gnarl, the minion I trained under for a while, is over 3,000 years old by doing this. Minato said, I've heard of Gnarl. She's supposedly the most evil of all the minions. Nat said, she is, and she deadly smart as well. In fact, that is how I came to be in the service of Lord Naruto. Gnarl had discovered that I learned her secret of how she's been around and in power so long. She was one of the first minions born. I don't know how she got to be in the position she is, but what I learned is she serves an underlord until he starts to become too independent of her, where she secretly sets him up to be killed by a hero but making sure he has an heir. She then trains the heir to avenge the fallen overlord until they get to independent of her, and she repeats the process. When she found out I discovered this, she sent out browns to kill me, and they were chasing me when I found Lord Naruto. But like I said, browns are very stupid. When they got in the presence of Naruto power, they forgot who they were chasing and what they were supposed to be doing. Since all minions know grays are the smartest, they turned to me for orders, and so I basically recruited them into serving Lord Naruto instead of Gnarl Overlord. The reason I was smiling is I knew some of the history Minato told us from my research in Gnarl Library. Gnarl is serving a fake overlord while I serve a true overlord, and I know sooner or later my overlord will face hers and she will finally get what's coming to her. Before she cackled evilly. Minato thought, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. When Naruto awoke again, he found himself with Nori laying beside him, and he blinked and looked at her for several moments and said, yeah, you're definitely Nori. Nori opened her eyes and said, you're awake, my lord. Naruto said, yeah, you know, you and my mother look a lot alike. Could you have been an Uzumaki? Gigi told me that Uzumaki have special chakra that made being a Jinchuriki easier. Maybe the reason you were a human sacrifice was because you were an Uzumaki. Nori looked down and said, Naruto, what do you think about me? Naruto looked confused a few moments and said, I like you, Nori. You're very precious to me and I would do anything to protect you. Why? Nori bit her lip and said, I have a confession to make of sorts, and I'm afraid that you may hate me when it is over. Naruto frowned and said, I'm not sure how many more confessions I can handle, Nori, but I'm here for you. Nori said, well, I lied when I said I had no memories of my past. I just was scared of what you would think of me when you learned the truth. Naruto asked, what truth? Nori moved her hair to the side, showing her pointy ears, and said, remember when you asked me about my ears when we were, you know. I told you I didn't know why they were pointy. The real reason is because I'm actually an elf. Not a human. Naruto eyes widened and said, wow, so that's how you know how to speak elf. Hey, how come you can't use that spell thing you mentioned to teach me to speak elf? If it wasn't for Nat, I would still need you to translate everything so I could speak with Tinbert and the dwarfs. Nori blushed and said, I told you I had met Kushina before. The reason I met her was because the hero who had taken her was originally after me. He was going to destroy my people, so my father offered me as a sacrifice to save our people. I would become the hero's slave and he would spare my people. I felt betrayed by my father and my people who sacrificed me, so I ran. I ran and the hero chased me. While running I ran into Kushina. I couldn't believe how much we looked alike. The hero thought she was me and took her while I ran. I later met your father and he at first thought I was your mother also, but then I told him that I wasn't her but told him about the hero who I thought was your mother. I later learned about the hero's death at Minato Hand when some of my people found me. They wanted to bring me back like nothing had happened. Like they didn't use me to save themselves. I hated them for it. I turned my back on them and vowed to myself I would never use my magic again since it was them who taught me magic. Nori, who still had her head down, said, I had discovered Minato and Kushina some time back and I began to follow them because I felt I owed a debt to them, since I can only imagine what happened to your mother when she was in that hero's hands. I didn't get too close because I wasn't for sure how they would react. I was afraid they would kill me, but then I heard your mom talking about a son. She seemed confused and scared, and I was hidden close by when they performed the ritual that turned you into an overlord, though I didn't know what was going on and didn't understand it. I had thought that you were Kushina's son and that the warlock was going to kill you for power or something, and I felt that I could repay Kushina by saving her son's life. I took you and ran with you as fast and as far as possible. I vowed to myself to protect you with my life to pay back Kushina for saving mine. I soon couldn't run anymore and decided to rest, and I began to play with your hair to pass the time, and that was when you woke up. Since I didn't know anything about you besides the fact I could feel you were an overlord because the feel of your power, I acted like I didn't know anything. Nori looked up with a blush on her face and said, when you defended me against the threat Tinbird had made, you have no idea how happy and good that made me feel. You had done something my family wouldn't do, and in that moment I fell in love with you, sire. As she looked down and said, if you hate me now, I understand and I'm willing to accept any punishment you deem fit, including my death. Naruto sat there for several minutes seeing Nori looking down, and he slowly reached his hand over, putting it under her chin and raised her head up, and when their eyes met he said, I don't hate you, in fact I think I might actually love you also. Nori blushed and Naruto leaned forward and captured her lips with his. 2 hours later, Naruto and Nori, who now had her hair pulled back in a single ponytail showing the world her ears, entered the room where the others were. Tinbird gasped and started to cuss in the dwarf language when he saw Nori ears and caused Nori to smirk at him as Nat blinked before pulling out a scroll from somewhere and began writing down some of the curses Tinbird was saying. Kushina smiled and gave Nori a nod, causing Nori to blush. Ignoring Tinbird's reaction, Naruto said, what exactly is going to happen now? I mean, Minato said, Naruto, can I speak with you privately a moment? Naruto looked at Minato while everyone else looked confused, and Naruto said, follow me. As he turned and Nori started to follow, and Naruto shook his head. After returning to Naruto's room, Naruto turned and punched Minato in the stomach, knocking the air out of him. Minato coughed a moment and said, I deserve that. Naruto said, you think? In a sarcastic tone. Minato sighed and said, I know you are angry at me, and if you want to kill me then do it, but promise me that you will look after your mother for me. Naruto glared at Minato and said, what did you want to talk about? Minato said, I want to know, do you trust Hiruzen and the elders? Naruto frowned and asked, why do you want to know? Minato said, your mother been using a jutsu we created to talk to me in our minds while we are touching each other. She's told me some about your life, and for what it's worth I'm sorry, but I didn't have a choice. Kyuubi tried to kill you with its claw, and both your mother and me jumped in front of it to shield you from being killed. Because of that we both were going to die, and Kyuubi would have killed you just to make sure you couldn't be used by someone else to seal him. The only way we could save you was to seal the Kyuubi in you. I didn't speak with Hiruzen and tell him to have you be seen as a hero. I mostly stayed quiet listening to your mother give you her final words and burning the image of both you and your mother into my mind, since I thought I would never get to see you again. Naruto bit his lip and said, you still didn't answer my question. Why do you want to know if I trust them? Minato said, Naruto, Hiruzen never once told me about him being related to me or that I had any family. I look back at my life now and wonder how much of it was created to mold me into the perfect puppet for him and his plans. From hearing your mother speak about your life, I fear that he's doing the same thing to you. I think he sees how you are treated here, and now that your mother and I have showed up, he sees there is a chance you could choose to stay here. When I think about Hiruzen, I see a Hokage first and a man second. I believe he will do whatever is best for Konoha instead of his family or friends. Even if you hate me, Naruto, I do love you, and the only thing I want for you and your mother is for you both to be happy and safe. If my death will give you both those, then please enter your mindscape and destroy my tower heart. Naruto closed his eyes and said, "No. I don't trust him, and I've never trusted the other two. I see now just how much he is manipulating me, because he made me fear that you would kill me, so when I heard you were here looking for me, I ran to him. I can't help but wonder if my graduating the way I did was all a setup. Does Iruka actually see me as me, or is he following orders? Are Tsuki and Ayame being paid to treat me the way they do? I hate it." Minato said. "I know. I can't help but feel the same way, son." Naruto frowned and said, "But what can I do?" Minato put his hand on Naruto's shoulder and said, "Ask yourself this. What is most important to you? What are you willing to do to protect what is important? Are you willing to let yourself be a puppet, or will you take your life in your own hands?" Naruto bit his lip, and Minato said, "If you will have me, I would be honored to stand by your side and give you advice if you want it, but I will never force you to do anything you want to do. You can even ignore my advice. I've spent over 50 years trying to get back to you and your mother. I will do whatever it takes to stay with you both if you will have me." Naruto smiled slightly and said, "Are you proud of me?" Minato said, "I'm very proud of the young man I see you have become, as well as what you have done, both your failures and your triumphs." Naruto let a tear fall and said, "All my life I wanted to know what it was like to hear those words from my father, to be held by my mother. You can't imagine how nice it is to have both those things after all these years." Minato said, "I can imagine, because I longed for them all my life since I was an orphan." Naruto wiped the tears from his eyes and said, I want to protect Nori and Nat and Tinbird and all the others, even the stupid Browns." Minato said, "But what about Konoha?" Naruto bit his lip and said, I don't know. I wish I could find out the truth about if those I care for there actually care for me, or if they are being paid or ordered to." Minato said, "Then why don't you?" Naruto blinked and looked at Minato, who said, "Right now Hiruzen and the elders can control you and manipulate you because they know about you being an overlord and everything that has happened here. I can make it where they don't know about all this, so they can't manipulate you with us." Naruto asked, "How?" Minato said, "I can place a seal on all three that will make them forget everything that has happened in the last 3 days. At their age they will think it is memory loss due to old age. This will allow you to find out who really cares for you in Konoha and give yourself time to get stronger here without being controlled by them." Naruto said, "But how do I know you're not doing the same thing they are?" Minato said, "Because you have the final word on everything as well as all the power. I can advise you and fight for you, but I won't risk losing my family by doing that. All these years all I could think about was you and your mother. You were my hope and guiding light. I would rather die than lose you, because you both are precious to me." Naruto, who had been watching Minato, smiled and said, "All right. I want to be mad at you, and it will take some time for me to completely trust you, but I am willing to give you a chance. When we return to the others, knock them out and seal them. I'll then have my cage Bunshin take them back to Konoha. Then Tinbird, Nori, Nat, Mom, you, and me are all going to sit and discuss what should be the next course of action." Minato said, "Thank you, son." Naruto smiled, and Minato pulled Naruto into a headlock and began to rub his knuckles into Naruto's scalp, causing Naruto to scream in pain a moment before he was released. And when Naruto glared at Minato, a smile formed on both their faces and both began to laugh as they exited the room. The sound of laughter was the first thing the others heard when Minato and Naruto returned to the room. Minato walked by Hiruzen and patted him on the shoulder as he passed before placing his hands on the back of both elders. The next moment all three dropped to the ground, passed out, causing everyone to go wide-eyed. Naruto quickly began to explain what happened between Naruto and Minato and why the three were knocked out, while three Cage Bunshin took them back to Konoha. After they were gone, Naruto said, "Now that they are gone, we are going to discuss what our plans for the future are." Minato said, "Naruto, there is much you don't know about this world. I am sure the others here can back me up on this. Even if we all see you as the leader and respect you, we all know you are young and inexperienced when it comes to things here. Right?" As he looked at the others in the room who nod. Naruto said, "Well, sorry for being only 14. Tinbird said, I still can't believe how powerful you are despite your age, sire. Naruto said, thanks. I think. Minato said, right now you have a target on your back because of your age, power, and experience. You're not currently powerful enough to deal with all that is coming. Look at this. As he pulled out a crystal from his pocket and set it in the center of the table, and the crystal started to glow before the table looked to be replaced with a map. Minato said, this is a quest crystal. It records a map that details everywhere you have been with the crystal. Adding several quest crystals together will expand a map and turn it into a map room of the world. All these areas are areas that I have been with this crystal. I've secretly placed seals on other people's crystal when I've met them, linking them with mine to update mine and help expand my map also. Naruto looked at the map and saw many different color areas and said, what is with all the colors? Minato said, those are areas owned by either another overlord, hero, or different races that are not currently allied with anyone. This blue area right here is currently your area, Naruto. Including you, there are 5 overlords, over 60 heroes, and over 200 free races that I am aware of. There may be even more that I am not aware of. So far you have only been detected by the Grey Dwarfs of Tinbird tribe here. The other overlords and heroes are definitely your enemy. They fight each other trying to gain more power for themselves because they wish to become strong enough to get to the human world, because once there they will be able to gain power quickly and possibly become powerful enough to take over both worlds. Luckily, because there are so many of them, they keep cutting each other's power apart, but if one get their hands on your power, it's over. Naruto frowned and said, why? Minato said, you are an actual descendant of the first overlord as well as a descendant of the king of the sixth kingdom. If one of them kill you, then just based on fear alone they will gain power enough to reach the human world. Not to mention if they actually get their hands on your tower heart and drain it of its power. You are currently able to go between worlds and bring others with you because of the power passed down from your ancestors. If one of them get that power, they won't have to worry about gaining more power. They will be able to leave this world instantly. Naruto said, then we have to make sure that doesn't happen. Minato said, it's not that easy. You are an overlord now. You have a tower heart. Your tower heart can't leave this world. If your tower heart is destroyed, then you dead for good. You can't die unless it is destroyed. The tower heart will bring you back to it if you're about to die and began to heal you with the power stored in it. This will weaken your overall power that you will have to build back, but it's better than being dead. But with your tower heart here, even if you aren't, then if someone else gets it, then they could drain it of its power and use it for themselves, but there is something else you're forgetting. Kyuubi. Since Minato had explained the Kyuubi, everyone knew about it, and Naruto asked, what does the fox have to do with it? Minato said, Tinbird told us about why he joined you. We all know that you tapped into Kyuubi power that day. You were angry and wanted to protect Nori, and that's not a bad thing, but if you became too angry, the Kyuubi could break free. If that happens, both worlds will be destroyed because Kyuubi will be pulled here when you die, since you are bound to it. Either Kyuubi will then start absorbing as much energy here from those he kills as he can, or someone will kill it and take its power for themselves. The only thing we can do is take the fox out of the equation. Minato looked at Naruto, who asked, what do you mean? Minato said, Naruto, this world is spirit-based. The life force we lose in the human world reforms here into minions, and once minions die, if they aren't linked to a minion hive, then they will become something else here in this world based on the amount of life force they were able to gain for themselves when they were minions. Everything in this world is based on life force. What makes overlords different and why they don't die is their life force is simply absorbed into their tower hearts, which is linked back into them so they don't lose it. Every time someone kills another person here, the life force either escapes and reforms again as another creature, or is absorbed by the creature who killed it so that the creature who killed it becomes more powerful so they can become stronger and live longer. Do you understand what I'm saying? We have to remove the fox from the equation so it can't take over you if you get angry. You have to drain the Kyuubi of its life force and claim it as your own. Everyone's eyes widen, and Naruto said, but, why me? Minato said, because if the Kyuubi is removed from you and taken by anyone else, then you will die. The only safe way to get rid of the fox completely is for you to do it. Nat said, he's right, sire. The world is a barbaric place where the powerful rule and the weak suffer and die. You are an overlord and you vowed that you would protect all those who serve you. By destroying this Kyuubi, you will become more powerful and be more able to protect those who serve you. In this world there are only 2 types of people. Your allies are your enemies. If they are not with you, then they are against you. Naruto closed his eyes and said, I see. Minato said, I'm not telling you to become a cold-blooded killer. I'm telling you though that you need to focus on what's most important to you and then ask yourself how far are you willing to do to protect it. Naruto took a deep breath and said, Mom, ally or enemy? Kushina said, I will stay by your side until either I die or you do, son. I'm not leaving you again. Naruto let out a breath and looked at Minato and who said, my family is the most important thing to me. I'll stand by you no matter what. Naruto moved his eyes to Tinbird who said, me and my people are yours, sire. Moving his eyes to Nori who said, my place is beside you always. Moving to Nat she said, I am yours to command, sire. Naruto took a deep breath and said, so basically it is versus the world. Kushina said, I'm afraid so, son. Naruto bit his lip and said, I guess then we should do this, but how do we do it? Minato looked at Nat who said, sire needs a gauntlet made for him with a gem stored in the palm of it. The gauntlet needs to be able to withstand combat as well as be adjustable so that it can grow as his hands grow because the gauntlet will be linked to the tower heart and if someone were able to get their hands on it would be able to gain access to his majesty power so the gauntlet must be worn by him pretty much all the time so someone doesn't sneak in and steal it. After he has his gauntlet then he has to place it against the tower heart and send his energy through the gauntlet into the tower heart. This will calibrate the tower heart and the gem together. Sire, once you have your gauntlet it might be a good idea to build a minion hive so that you can start spawning minions for yourself instead of the few we have here. Naruto said, I thought you said something about a spawning pool before for the Browns. Nat said, well, about that your majesty, you see, as she explained her past as well as about minions in general like she had the others when Naruto was passed out. After she was done Naruto sighed and said, I don't like being lied to, Nat. Next time you purposely lie to me and I find out I will punish you. Nat looked intrigued and said, really, how, sire? Naruto thought a moment before he smirked and said, I'll make you cook and clean as a servant for the Browns for an entire week. Everyone's eyes widened and Nat said, sire, you're evil. I like it. Naruto sighed and said, the more I learn about this place the more I think I'm going to go crazy. Minato said, we're all crazy, son. Woman drive us that way. Every woman in the room glared at him and Naruto said, ladies, enjoy punishing him. Tinbird, can you have one of the smiths begin making me a gauntlet like Nat specified? Tinbird said, of course, sire, though I will need you to come for a fitting to make sure that when it's first made it will meet specifications. Naruto said, then let's do that. Watching my father get kicked in the nuts loses its enjoyment after the first couple of kicks. Tinbird said, right this way, sire. As he lead Naruto away both ignoring Minato moans of pain behind them.